Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special episode of Let's Talk Supply Chain. Today, we are doing a live stream in partnership with Export Development Canada to celebrate Women's Entrepreneurship Day. As a female leader in business, especially in a male-dominated industry, you all know how important it is to me to champion the voices of women and the underrepresented. And awareness days like this one are a great opportunity to shine a light on some of the key issues we face in supply chain right now. And today, we're talking about women-owned businesses and export. Now, this is a really interesting one because even some of the most successful women business owners can all of a sudden get a little nervous when it comes to the topic of export. It's something I think we all really need to get more comfortable with so that as women entrepreneurs, we can make sure we're leading the way on a global scale. We'll be taking questions throughout our chat today on our live streams on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. So be sure to comment, send us your thoughts and questions, and we'll discuss as many as we can along the way. So a warm welcome to Jennifer, Laura, and Shamira. I'm really excited to dive into this topic with you guys today. So let's kick off by introducing yourself. Jennifer, tell us who you are, what you do, and what does entrepreneurship or Women's Entrepreneurship Day mean to you?
Hi, Sarah, and hi, everybody. It's great to be here with you all today. So I'm Jennifer Cooke, and I'm the manager of diverse client markets, as well as the corporate lead for women in trade at Export Development Canada. It's my role to develop and execute on EDC strategy to help more women-owned and women-led companies succeed in international markets. To me, really, Women's Entrepreneurship Day is a day designated to observe, to celebrate, and to talk about the work of women entrepreneurs. It's a day to be inspired and recognize the many achievements of business women around the world and support them to continue on their business journey wherever they are. So I'm super excited to have this conversation today.
I love that. And it's so true, right? We need to celebrate a little bit more often. So, Laura, I'm turning over to you. Tell us who you are, what you do, and what's the one thing that you love about Women's Entrepreneurship Day?
Yeah, definitely. So my name is Laura Burget. I'm the co-founder of Three Ships. We're a line of natural skincare products, all made locally here in Toronto. So we started the brand 3.5 years ago with myself and my co-founder when we were just fresh out of school. I'd studied chemical engineering and she went to Queen's for Business. So we launched a business out of our own personal frustrations with the lack of affordable and transparent natural skincare brands. Everything was either really expensive and clean or it was really cheap and greenwashed and misleading. So 2 years ago is when we went full time with the company. This year we're on track to do $1.5 million in sales. We're just on Dragon's Den, like around 6 weeks ago is when we did our filming. That episode went live 2 weeks ago. So if you want to watch, you can view it on CBC Gem. It was a super fun experience. And 2021 is going to be a big year for us. We just finished a round of seed financing as well, where we raised $1.3 million from a number of angel investors. And we're launching and expanding heavily into the US this coming year. We're launching into 505 Targets across the states. We're launching into all of the Whole Foods in Northern California. We're launching into Kohl's in the US as well. And we're also landing some large retail accounts within Canada too. So we're launching onto Indigo, Hudson's Bay Company, and Holt Renfrew, here in Canada. So in terms of what Women's Entrepreneurship Day means to me, it really represents courage and encouraging other women to pursue businesses. Since I come from a very male-dominated field, I'm very comfortable around men and don't feel intimidated or overwhelmed, but I know this isn't the case for all women. So really my goal as a founder is to encourage other women to pursue male-dominated fields and to know that that actually gives you a bit of an advantage because you'll automatically stand out within the crowd and be able to really prove people wrong when they underestimate you. After school, I went into software sales, which again is very male dominated and very male heavy. And I would love for more women to get into sales as a career. I think it's an amazing career. Everyone needs to learn how to sell. It's so critical. So yeah, I guess Women's Entrepreneurship Day represents inspiration to me.
I love that. And thanks for sharing your story. Congratulations on all the amazing stuff that that has been going on for you and your business. So now, Shamira, over to you. Tell us who you are, what you do, and what does Women's Entrepreneurship Day mean to you?
First of all, Laura, that's an amazing story. Like, it's incredible. So I'm really, really happy for you.
Thank you.
For me, so Signify, I'm the CEO of Signify Solutions. The company started 15 years ago. We've seen exponential growth, especially over the last 4 years. We doubled last year, and this year we're set to triple, and we expect to double again next year. So double of this year's triple. So it's been amazing, And for me especially, I sit back and I think 5 years ago, you're worried about paying payroll. And now we're just really worried about we're running out of space. We need more people. It's a different type of problem, but it's just a lot more fun. So, we're a company that does automated retail and solutions like locker solutions, automated locker solutions. So the company is set up with production, engineering, and then we do deliveries and support customers all over the world. So if you go to the airport in Toronto, you see the source machines. That's an example of the stuff that we do. Touchscreen vending of very high, expensive products.
Amazing.
So as far as Entrepreneurship Day, I think it's also, outside of celebrating and just being proud, I think it's also a time for reflection. I think really you need to stop and think where we are today. And I have to tell you, I started this is my third business. My first business, and I was really young. I was my 20s, and I remember going to a Mississauga Board of Trade meeting. I was the only woman there. I was the only minority there. It was really, it was a bit scary, honestly, and I was quite shy. I go today, and it's not like that. You see a lot of powerful women. You see a lot of, different cultures. It's just the world is really, really changed, and I'm really happy because I go back and now and my first company, as an example, the salespeople, we always hired Canadian, like white salespeople, male, and I'd go to a meeting and they would automatically assume I'm the secretary or the receptionist or something. I mean, somebody who's the assistant. And it was only when the questions started coming from a client and I started answering them, they suddenly shifted, said, "Oh, you're the person that knows the stuff," right? So, it's such a long time ago. I don't feel that way at all anymore. I'm in meetings. So you can really see, how much has changed.
Yeah, and we're celebrating not only your successes as well, but we're celebrating, women entrepreneurs everywhere. So I just want to say hello to everybody that's out on my personal LinkedIn page. Michael, Kenton, Rajesh, thank you so much for joining us over there. Memory, I see your question, and we will definitely get to your question a little bit later on for Laura. But let's get started with the conversation first. So Jennifer, let's talk about a little bit of context. When we're talking about export, what do we mean by that? Because it might not be exactly what people assume, right?
You're so right, Sarah. In fact, in lots of conversations that I have, especially today, especially with women entrepreneurs, I think that a lot of people don't necessarily relate to the word export. I think a lot of people, when you think the word export, you think, companies that actually manufacture a product or a good that you put in a box or you put on a boat and you either drive or sail it across the border. But really, an export is something that's sold outside of Canada when you sell your goods or your services outside of Canada. So yes, absolutely, services can be exported. So, in fact, in Canada today, I would say that services have surpassed, in terms of dollars amounts of exports, more and more we're exporting our services from Canada. And there's many different ways you can do that. So that's what I wanted to clarify today when it comes to exporting. It's really when you're selling your goods or your services to somebody else that's not from within Canada, that's outside of Canada. Services can be sold or exported many different ways. It can be, your service or your good that's consumed here in Canada. So for example, in the hospitality industry, although there's not much of that happening today with our borders closed, that's considered an export. But really, technology as well has really enabled companies to grow and export, and that's something that is really real today. Getting online enables you to open up the world of potential customers by leveraging technology, whether it's goods or services that you sell.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that because technology is a huge driver at the moment to really help us take a look at international markets a lot easier than it has been in the past. And I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But I want to get into misconceptions and I want to talk to Laura and Shamira about that. What are some of those misconceptions around exporting and where do you think they come from? Laura, I'm going to start with you. And then Jennifer, actually, you're going to jump in on this one.
So I think that one of the biggest misconceptions is that it's really difficult and very confusing and has a lot of red tape, which isn't necessarily the case as much as people would think it is. So speaking from our point of view as a beauty brand, there's of course regulations within the beauty industry that you have to adhere to, and all of those requirements are different across different markets. So if, for example, in the US, the overseeing agency is the FDA. So they have specific packaging requirements around your formulations. In our space, it's mostly packaging that they really take a close look at. But it's really not as complex as what people would think. And it really gives you a really significant competitive advantage versus just sticking within the Canadian market. So for us, like the US is our main export market, and it represents probably around 50% of our business. And that will start to become even more significant over time because US consumers are a lot faster to buy and to shop than Canadian counterparts are. It also helps you from a financing standpoint, since most of the large VC funds and parent companies that might look to acquire smaller brands are based out of the States. So they really value having a presence within that market specifically. So I would always advise new founders or founders that are thinking of expanding to think about how this plays into their overall long-term goals and what other purposes does that market serve within their expansion goals, and to also take things one step at a time. It's not as complicated as you would think, but there's definitely a tendency to bite off more than you can chew, especially from a logistics standpoint. Think about, okay, how do we get our products over to that market and making sure that you have your supply chain set up beforehand.
Yeah, what are the duties? What are my total landed
Exactly.
costs?
Yeah.
Right? What are my surprises that might come up that I may have to pay for that could be part of that cost? Jennifer, just quickly to add on to that, I mean, you're talking to entrepreneurs all the time. So what are some of the regular misconceptions that you can add on to what Laura said?
Well, it's really great. And I'm super happy that Laura mentioned the United States, because actually a lot of people don't consider selling to the US as an export. But guess what? It is. That's outside of Canada. The other things I would say is that a lot of people think exporting is maybe just for large companies or established companies. And that's really not the case anymore either. You can start with, actually, I've heard of a lot of companies that actually start in a different market. Particularly if you're more of a technology-based company. I've heard many companies start in the US where new technology adoption happens first. So before they come back to Canada and find a market for their products or services here at home. So like I mentioned before, yes, technology and services can be exported. That's another huge misconception. And I find that companies don't necessarily know that there's organizations out there that can help you. And, there's a lot of misconceptions around that you have to do it alone. And that's not necessarily the case either. So a lot of misconceptions. One thing I thought about actually on the last question to think about for entrepreneurs that are listening in to think about is that, you may offer a product or service that you don't sell outside of Canada directly, but you could also be part of a supply chain that's ultimately an export supply chain. Maybe you're selling to somebody else in Canada, but your goods are being incorporated into something else that then is onward exported. And, certain sectors in particular, like the automotive sector is one good example where that's an export related supply chain. And we have many of those in Canada. So, again, it's about that mindset of thinking about the whole chain of supply that ultimately leads to an export.
Yeah, and I think you'd be surprised as to where your customer could be. Right? Your ultimate customer could be somewhere else in the world. I mean, I know some entrepreneurs that were looking at South America. And one of the reasons for that is because Amazon doesn't do a very good job of delivering goods in South America. And so they are looking for products from North America. And so how can you be part of that ecosystem? Well, Panama is a great gateway to South America, and utilizing places like that to maybe store some inventory so that you can do some quick turnaround and deliver goods into South America. All different strategies that you can definitely take a look at. So before I go on to the next question, just want to give a shout out to Trey and Rizwan. Thanks so much for joining us over on my personal LinkedIn. Now we're going to talk about why export is so important. So Shamira, I'm going to start with you. Why should women entrepreneurs pay attention to this and amping up? What's the value in thinking about their businesses on a global scale rather than a national scale?
So, first of all, the Canadian market isn't big enough. And Canadians in general, I think, are a little more conservative. At least that's my feeling. So, I think, and if you look at us, when we started with a solution that's very innovative, our customers actually came from, our major customer came from Dubai. We, in the beginning, ignored them, told them, like, we just don't do stuff in Dubai. And then they said, no, we're really interested. And we said, okay, if we get a deposit, then we'll consider, and they sent us a deposit. So, and then of course we worked with EDC because it ended up being a multi-million-dollar deal, and EDC backed us up to help us, to do the guarantees, etc. But we would have missed that opportunity altogether. But what we did find is once we worked with Dubai, first of all, they're very innovative. They move fast. They really pushed us to do more than we would have normally done for a typical customer. And it's only years later that we started closing business in Canada for those products. And we were ahead of the game because we did export stuff. And then I agree with Laura. Americans are much, much faster, and there's more of them, and things just happen a lot faster. So if you look at our company right now, at least 50%, now maybe more than 50% is US, but then we do a lot of global business. So Canada is not more than 10 to 15% of our business. And had we not focused on export, we would not be here today, I don't think. So wow. I would really say it's absolutely critical. I mean, so today we have, a person in France, in Germany, in the Nordics, in the UK, we have people in the US. So we've really expanded, and that's where all our sales are mostly coming from. I just hired my first.
Yeah, and that's an incredible statement, right? Like we might not be here as a company if we hadn't considered exporting. I mean, I'm just going to leave that right there because that is a huge, huge statement, especially if you're having challenges within the Canadian market and you're wondering what you can do and where you can go and how you can do it. So Laura, I'm going to send that one over to you. How important was exporting to your business?
Massively important for us. So for us as well, it's well over 50% of our revenue. And there's no doubt in my mind that we would not be the company that we are now without the export market. We entered into it pretty early on in the life cycle of our company as well. Like it wasn't something that we shied away from. Maybe it was just like blind optimism that my co-founder and I were like, oh yeah, like no big deal. We'll just figure this out and do it as we go along and ask lots of questions as we grow and expand. But it's been really, really important for us.
Awesome. And now, Jennifer, I mean, let's talk about the mindset, right, around global thinking. What does that mean? I mean, it's really crucial. The concept of globalization is something I've talked about on the show recently. It's something that, businesses, supply chain professionals, women entrepreneurs are thinking a lot about, especially with everything that's happened in the last 6 months, right? Where should I manufacture? Should I diversify my manufacturing? And so what does the idea of global thinking mean? And what part is it going to play in the future of supply chain?
That's a loaded question.
I know.
But what I'm so happy to hear Shamira and Laura's stories because it is exactly what what we see from Canadian companies all the time is that if you're exporting, you tend to be larger. In fact, for women entrepreneurs, I think the statistic is they're 4 times more likely to be larger than non-exporters. They're more innovative, right? Because they're pushed to be more competitive or more innovative when you're competing on a global scale as opposed to just locally. But I definitely do think for companies, it has to start with mindset. It has to start by thinking big. And I know Shamira has talked about this in conversations with me before, right? You have to, from the outset, think that your business is going to be global. Don't restrict yourself to a local or provincial or even just a national market. Think about where you could take your business. And, we've seen with this current pandemic, some of the reasons why the idea of diversification, when it comes from your supply chain, as well as to your customer markets, why diversification is so important, because we never know what's going to happen. Another characteristic of companies that export is that they tend to stay in business longer because of that diversification. It's a natural risk mitigant as well. So, you're better able to handle ebbs and flows that might happen in any one market, with things south of the border in the US, things can change very rapidly. So making sure that you have, some alternates when it comes to your suppliers, but also have customers spread out in different markets is a way of mitigating risk and protecting yourself. So once you've got that mindset, the other aspect is thinking about how do you, think global, but then tailor your offering to specific markets. And that's a really important aspect to consider, is, what does it mean to sell into Europe versus selling into South America or even into the US, right? These are lots of things that need to be considered, So, how can you get closer to your customers to meet their local need? So start big and then go local and figure out how you can make that work.
Absolutely. I like Audrey's point. She said, as soon as you cross a border with one tiny package, you're an exporter. Congratulations. I love that. And then Laura used the hashtag #SheTrades. Memory, I see you there. I know you've got some really great questions and we're going to keep those till the end. So we'll definitely come back to those. And Kristen, thanks so much for joining us over on my personal LinkedIn page. So now let's get into obstacles. When it comes to doing business, do you think women-owned businesses tend to have more trepidation when it comes to export? Are they afraid of scaling up? Is imposter syndrome kicking in? I mean, that's a huge one. And is there actually some internalized maybe misogyny at play? Are women hardwired to believe that they can handle things on a smaller scale, but can't compete with the big companies on a larger scale? Lots of questions all rolled into one, but I'm going to send this over to you, Laura.
Yeah, definitely. I think this is a huge problem that women have a tendency to for sure think smaller. And there's a lot of data that backs this up as well. Women have a tendency to not take on as much debt as their male counterparts within business. And debt is an important way to grow and expand your company. It's very hard to grow without it. And there's a extreme leniency and hesitation towards women. So I know from our work with BDC that they're actively trying to get women to take on more debt with them. And the same applies for export. I think women have a tendency to think, oh no, this isn't something that I can do. And I'm not sure if it's, internalized misogyny or if it's the imposter syndrome that you talked about, Sarah. I think the imposter syndrome certainly plays into things. And I think women also feel a greater level of responsibility for whatever it is that they decide to take on. So whether that's hiring, they tend to be very, very slow to hire compared to their male counterparts. And that tends to limit growth too, because it slows you down when you're not hiring fast enough. Same with this responsibility that they feel to their customers. Maybe they're scared, okay, I don't want to make any mistakes here. So I'm going to put the brakes on a little bit and not expand as quickly. So it's definitely a major problem. I think that the best way that we can solve this is to do things like what we're doing right now of sharing webinars and having conversations from current female founders that are talking about their experience with expanding and growing and showing that it's not something that they need to be scared of necessarily, and that it's something that they're totally capable of doing. I think there's a stat that only 2% of Canadian women-owned businesses exceed $1 million in sales. And I would love to see that number go up.
Yes, we definitely need to see that
We
number
need to
go
see
up.
more big female-owned businesses and women thinking bigger about the businesses that they're doing, because we are 50% of the economy or more in terms of buying and spending power. So I can only imagine how much bigger we could be as a country and as an economy if women started thinking bigger as well.
I can just feel the audience, taking a deep breath and just resonating with some of the stuff that you just said, because I'm sure that you hit the nail on the head on, a lot of what some of our audience is experiencing as well. Shamira, what do you want to add to that? Like, has any of that come up for you as you've been in business, and maybe how would you tell people to deal with it?
So I've always been scolded since I was young for being not cautious enough, not, and I really think in hindsight that those were good things. That's actually what's got me to where I am. I think women think about things like, well, let's take baby steps. Like, I think you got to stop thinking that way and say, I don't have to figure everything out before I do it. Just have a direction, know where you're going, jump in, and trust me, you'll figure it out as it happens, right? The other thing is, it's not as scary as you think when you talk about exports, because there are millions of people out there looking for opportunities, right? So when you speak to someone somewhere else, they're looking at it the other way and saying, oh my God, if I could get this Canadian product, because Canada's got a great reputation, or if I could get, so, you have to remember that you're not in this little bubble all by yourself trying to figure this out. Even when you talk about logistics, there's thousands of companies that have been doing this for years and years and years. They're there to help. They want your business. So I think instead of trying to solve everything and think about it and being so planful, everything I was told I had to do more of, I think you just have to kind of like, okay, you have an end goal. Of course, you have to be strategic and you have to think about it, but don't get stuck doing too much thinking. Become more action driven. Just make it happen, right? And then work through it as it happens. And I think men tend to do that much better than women, right?
Yeah, no, they absolutely do. And I can hear them resonating with you as well and being like, yes, Shamira. And so now this is the part of the discussion that I really like, because we're going to get into some real life examples from both you, Shamira, and Laura about some of the obstacles that you've come across when you've looked at exporting or when you've actually exported. What are some of the obstacles, the challenges from an example standpoint? Like, if you can give a real life example of what that's looked like, what you went through, and how you overcame them. Laura, I'll send that over to you first.
Yeah, so I think for us, one of the big challenges was concerns about non-payment, because you don't know as much about these external vendors, and there's less of like a formal legal process that's protecting you when you are exporting. We had a large contract come in for around $250,000 that we were very worried about, because it was such a significant amount. And if for whatever reason that customer didn't pay us, it would have been the end of our business. So I think that that's like a core key thing to think about. And I think that's why EDC is great as well, is the fact that they're able to support in that way and take those concerns off of your plate and ensure that you're ready and set up, and that you have the support, like Jennifer mentioned, that's available to you. There's a ton of support available, and our EDC account manager has been amazing for connecting us with those resources. The other thing as well would be currency differences in exchange rates. So it's something that the Canadian and US dollar play off of each other, but can swing sometimes. So you don't want to be in a situation where you're betting on a certain currency exchange rate, and then the actual rate that you end up getting once that sale comes through with your payment terms ends up being really, really different. So I'd say that founders should think about ways that they can hedge against those currency exchange risks. So either working with your bank and your bank manager at your account, if you have a big order that comes in that you want to hedge against, or ensuring that you have things set up like US dollar credit cards, so you can put any US dollar fees onto a US dollar card and not be having to pay those extra like 2% that the bank kind of charges you for, and it's total ripoff. It's a great thing to have set up ahead of time.
So Jeff just asked, and this is totally relevant to what you were just saying, curious, what do you mean by that? Can you explain it just a little bit more?
In terms of the US cards and things like that?
I would bet probably the hedging part of it.
The hedging part. Yeah. So for example, say that we land a contract from a large US retailer and it's for $200,000 US. At today's exchange rate, that would be around like 250,000 or so, 200 or 275 Canadian. But with all of the complexities of the political system down the States, as well as how impacted Canada's dollar is by the price of crude oil, these are markets that move so quickly, and you can see crashes within your currency exchange rate. So if I'm basing my cost of goods sold off of a Canadian dollar amount because we source all of our products in Canada, but we're getting paid in US dollars, and then the US dollar collapses or the Canadian dollar increases in its rate, you can actually see like a reversal of the value of that contract. So instead of it being $275,000 Canadian, that could crash if our dollar starts performing better. And the US dollar crashes and performs worse, that could go down to like 210,000 Canadian. And that's a big difference in terms of calculating your bottom line. So that's just something that you want to be mindful of, and to try to keep currencies in their own currencies. So when you're paying out someone in US dollars, you're paying with your US dollar account and you have that buffer room. So hopefully that makes sense.
I think it does. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit of a complexity, but it's easy once you like wrap your mind around it more, that you're just like, okay, I don't want to be moving money from Canadian dollars to US dollars all the time. I want to pay in US dollars to my US dollar accounts, just to help you mitigate those risks.
Yeah, and I think some of what you're saying is really be prepared. I mean,
Exactly.
let's be honest, exporting, logistics, supply chain, it's never perfect. And so what Shamira said earlier, and the phrase that I really like, is progress, not perfection. Take
Mm-hmm.
and figure it out as you're going along, but be prepared and have the right partners and have the right people in place, and just do it, right?
100%.
Yeah, Shamira, I'm going to send it over to you. Do you have any examples that you can sort of share with us of obstacles you've had when you've been exporting and how you've overcome them?
Yeah, obstacles. I think the money part is that the currency is important. All our price lists, everything we do is in US dollars. And that's been our way to kind of handle, we charge for US dollars, our costs in Canadian dollars. So of course we're happy when the US dollar is strong. But we've kind of always done that, and we always build in a contingency for that. The things that we get concerned about are IP, because now you're working with other countries, and how do you protect your IP? And the second thing that's always been a concern has been certification, which I'm sure Laura's gone through in a different way, but certifying. So, in most cases, and we found a good company in Canada that we work with that's helping us get certifications. But sometimes that can get a bit onerous. And of course, again, as we get the deals, we're kind of always one step, we know where we're going, and we're always kind of certifying, trying to get there. But those are the two things I think have been a bit painful. I mean, figuring out how to trust people is something you just get from experience, I think, right? You have to take the time, and I think it's great now compared to before in terms of being able to chat with people, and you're on WhatsApp people, and you get to learn and understand people. But I would say the challenges for us has always been around IP and trying to get ourselves protected. A lot of contracts we do will pick jurisdictions in other countries. And so one of the things we always try to do is say, any contract we do, jurisdiction has to be Canada. And if we can't have Canada, then we pick Delaware in the US as a standard.
Yes.
Because it's similar to Canadian law. But that's where, I get worried. Like, I'm not going to sign a contract where the jurisdiction is in Russia, for instance. Right? So, I think those are things that we've learned from over time.
Yeah, a lot of times, even with NDAs, like if you're looking at NDAs and, they want it in their law or jurisdiction, you can always find a place that you can meet in the middle so that both parties, if there is a dispute or anything like that, you can both travel to the place. And so that kind of mitigates your risk there as well. Just something that I thought I would throw in there. So, we've touched on the issue of misconceptions, mindsets being a big one. But another big issue is having the knowledge to carry it all out. Conversations like this, like you said, Laura, they're going to help, but women entrepreneurs also need access to the right resources, the skill sets, have the opportunity to skill up if necessary, and also access connections, right? We all need the connections. We all need the network, because you can never underestimate, the importance of connections and networking in business. How do we help women with these things? Where do we start, Laura? Like if I'm a woman entrepreneur, I've got a successful business, or I'm just starting my business in Canada, but I really want to think about it on a global scale. Where do I start? Like, what do I read? Where do I go?
The first thing that I think you should do is to check that there's actually a market there for you, because you might think that your product is going to do really well in a certain market, but then you might start to do more research into it and realize, oh, wow, there's this one company that owns 90% of the market. And like maybe that's not going to be actually a good market for us to enter into, or there's some sort of government system in place. So I'd say like first, just reach out to people who would be potential buyers within that market and start talking to them. You'll be able to learn a lot from just those initial conversations, because they'll tell you what you need to go through for the most part to be compliant within that market. They'll start asking about certain regulations and certifications if those exist. Of course, I wouldn't rely on those conversations exclusively, but that's a really, really good place to start, is to just make sure that there's actually a need and an interest. And again, I would say like just dive right in. Like Shamira said, I think there's a tendency to want to have all of your market research done and know exactly what the steps are. And that's just like probably not realistic unless you're a massive company. But if you're a company that's, in the like $100,000 a year to like $3 million a year range within Canada, and you're just looking to expand out to another market that you think is going to do well, reach out to whoever would be your buyer in that market and try to get on calls with them and ask them questions. So I'd say that that's like a good starting point. And then of course have the great like basis, like experts in your court as well. So make sure that you talk to someone who's a tax accountant that works specifically with that market. You don't have to bring them onto a retainer or have them do like a detailed analysis, but just get on a 30-minute call. People are more than happy to do these things for free. They want to help other businesses expand within Canada, and they use it as a way to, source future clients for them. So it's something you should take advantage of. Talk to EDC, see what their advice is. Talk to your banker, see what their advice is. Talk to lawyers, IP lawyers, regulatory people. There's lots of agencies, especially within our space, that will help you to actually make those moves into those new markets. So they'll do all the submission of all of your like approval and product testing forms for you. But when you get on those initial calls with them, they'll tell you what the steps are to take and what you need to do. Their service is to do that for you. So it takes it off of your plate. So it's a great way for you to find out about what's actually required without having to spend any of your like valuable money on doing a detailed market research.
Awesome. That was great. And before we get into EDC and the future, which is the next part of this conversation, I am going to do memories questions. So, and this kind of goes back to the question that we just had, but what has been your biggest challenge in entering international markets, and how have you separated yourself from the crowd?
So I think our biggest challenge is definitely the shipping costs. So since we sell direct consumer on our website, as well as we do wholesale agreements, our cost of shipping to the US from Canada or to any other market is so high. We used to ship internationally over to Europe and Asia, and we just found that the packages were getting lost constantly. It was really expensive to get anything that was tracked. So usually customers would opt for non-tracked. And it was such a burden, because around 25% of our packages were getting lost on the way over to Europe and Asia. It was really high. Yeah, it was terrible. So then we're like, you know what, this isn't worth it. This is like such a small part of our business. We're not actively marketing to these markets, and it's requiring so much more time to look into why these shipments are getting lost. So let's just like not do it. So I'd say that that's something that we definitely experienced, was probably our number one issue when we were first getting going. So there's great platforms available within Canada to help with better shipping. So one of them is called Chit Chats, like CHITCHATS. And they've been a great partner for us for shipping out to our customers, because it allows us to feed right into the US Postal Services system. And they also ensure that all of their packages are compliant with the requirements within the border. So like no food items in there, no like lithium batteries, has to be below a certain dollar value for them to take it across for you. So by working with them, you already know that you're covered in that standpoint, and you don't have to worry about the customs paperwork and things like that when you're using them as a platform. So that was probably our biggest issue. Yeah.
That's, you know what, and that's a big one, especially with e-commerce.
Yeah.
Right? You really have to anticipate what that final mile delivery cost is going to be for you, and how that's going to impact. A lot of people are expecting free shipping. when you're shopping online. And sometimes it's really just not possible, because I remember shipping products into, like you said, Europe or whatever. I mean, that could cost upwards of $25, just to get it there without tracking. And tracking is going to cost 50 or something. Like, you can't absorb that cost on the product that you have. So that's a really, really big one. So Memory also asks, she says, cross-border operations are very manual here in Africa and carry a high administrative cost. Is that a common trend as well overseas? And how have you gone about solving that, if you've experienced it at all? Jennifer, I don't know if you want to take this one, or maybe Shamira.
Go for it, Shamira.
Hold on.
We ship 800-pound machines. So unlike your products, so we have a lot of challenges. We have the same challenges in terms of damage, and then trying to fix a damaged product in another country is also very expensive and very painful. So we ended up using crates. We package our product a certain way so that they arrive well. So you were asking administratively. Absolutely, different countries are very expensive. Africa is a place that we ship to as well. So I think it's come down to really finding the right relationships and the right logistics companies. So we use a different company for Asia, we use a different company for Europe, and then there are companies that really specialize in Africa. There are companies that really specialize in shipping to Japan. So that requires a bit of work and trying and finding the right partner, because you will find that a lot of logistics companies have specialties, right?
Yes, they do. That's a great point. And, sometimes we go to our freight forwarders and ask them to quote on all of our shipments. Meanwhile, they're really just good in certain areas, and we need to be able to recognize that as well. So I think that's a really great point. Okay, so Jennifer, back over to you. How exactly can Export Development Canada help facilitate all of these things that we've been talking about today? How does that support work? How does a woman entrepreneur know it's time to come and talk to you?
Awesome question, Sarah. And I think, Laura and Shamira have both really outlined, some of the potential challenges with exporting. And I think a lot of that, to their point, while, it's great to take action and get in there, having a solid strategic plan to think through what the potential market risks and challenges can be and how you can mitigate them is a great way to start. Think about what tools or resources are available. How can you use them to your advantage? How can you set up your business to protect yourself, for example? What are some of the important tools to mitigate the risks that have been mentioned? Risk of non-payment, risk of IP protection. These are all things that can be planned for and mitigated as you look to grow your business internationally. And finally, what resources will you need to be set up for success? And when we talk about resources, we talk about both the human resources and the financial resources. So, and Laura and Shamira have both talked about that as well. Who do I need to hire? Do I need an export manager to help me with this? Or do I need to make sure I have a solid team backing me up so that, you as the founder can then go out and access new markets and take on that export planning yourself. So, EDC is definitely here to support Canadian entrepreneurs no matter where they are in their export journey. And we do that in three main ways. It starts with specialized international insights and knowledge and information that can help a company through the planning or strategy development as they're starting and looking at, developing new markets. There's many resources that EDC can offer, all for free, to be honest with you. Tools like our Export Help Hub and our trade advisors. I think Emiliano might be even on the today, who can answer any trade-related question you might have. Trust me, they can get you an answer. So use them as your research team. They can help you get access to information. We've got tools like Enlist, which provides a pre-vetted list of logistics providers, or Company Insight if you're looking to do some initial due diligence on a company you're thinking about getting into partnership with. These are tools that EDC has, put a lot of our knowledge into to provide this information for Canadian companies. And of course, you can sign up for a My EDC account, which gives you access to numerous market reports, white papers about different markets, and webinars on different trade-related topics.
Lots
the
of great information.
Tons. And, the next pillar we go into is, education. If you want to get, skilled so that you can export with confidence, EDC is partnered with the likes of the Forum for International Trade Training. So, we've got a whole series. Even if you don't have much time, the Fit Light series is an example where you can get a good snapshot on a single trade-related topic and consume that within an hour. The Trade Accelerator program is another program that most, if you're looking to enter a new market and you want to develop an export plan, check out the Trade Accelerator program.
We participated in that, just to jump in, and it was excellent. Yeah, it was so good. We were probably a little bit early for what we should have been participating in it, but that's not a bad thing, and then at least we got comfortable about knowing, okay, if we're going to be hiring someone that's outside of Canada, what are the considerations? What are the tax rules? What's Wayfair law, and how is that law evolving over time with the US? We did a whole market analysis of the Hong Kong market was the market that we were exploring in that case. So it was a very, very valuable program. I would definitely recommend it.
I'm so glad, because it takes you through all the different considerations and things to think about as you look to a certain market. Mm-hmm. And then finally, there's the financial tools, and that's where EDC's value comes in. And I think Shamira could probably talk to that a little bit, whether it's, credit insurance, like Laura has mentioned, to mitigate the risk of not being paid, particularly if you're taking on a large contract. We find that as exporters or companies start entering a new market, the US is a great example. Contracts tend to be larger right off the bat. And if it's a particularly large contract for your company, it represents more risk if you don't get paid. So consider protecting yourself, and make sure you have enough financial resources. We've heard in the conversation today that debt is more than just a bad 4-letter word, right? It can help you achieve your goals faster. So don't shy away from debt. Learn about it. Learn, how you can use a bank loan to accelerate your growth. And by the way, EDC can help you get that bank loan too. So, access the working capital that you need to truly grow.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Shamira, did you want to jump in on what she was saying?
Yeah, absolutely. EDC has been so instrumental for us being where we are. And one thing I think women probably suffer from this is trying to get a loan from a bank. I think it's probably easier for men, I'm guessing, but I think it is. It's just that I don't know what it is, but I think it's perception-wise. I think there's an issue there. But for the longest time, my maximum line of credit was $40,000. It was just so terrible. I just could not get beyond that. And when we're probably now at $2 million, and I think a lot of that, the stepping stone to get there was really EDC, because they guaranteed the bank on our behalf, and that changed the game for us, right? Because all it does really, when you don't take on that debt, is you're going to get there if you're determined, but you'll get there way later, right? So you just slow your growth down massively. Yeah. Now you can't hire the right resources, you can't take the right actions, so you have to kind of, plod along and, instead of doing the right thing when you needed to do it. So yeah, that was massive. We've used EDC also to help us when we have a big deal that we know is an important deal. It's not a lot more to just pay that little extra bit of money to EDC to have that insurance, right? And then you've got peace of mind, and your worst case scenario, and then you can kind of forge ahead and be a business person, right? Versus kind of hesitating and not doing what you should do. So it's been instrumental. And then, as we grew, there's this saying which said the banks always give you an umbrella when it's sunny, and they take it away when it's raining, right? So with what EDC did is allowed us through those times when we were growing. And then now that our balance sheet is strong, now the bank can step in and start, doing what they have to do. But we needed that help to get to that point.
Absolutely. And I think the other critical thing to mention here as well is, Jennifer, you mentioned earlier about technology and how it's making it easier for us to be able to export. And I think one of the things that is critical to that is trade missions used to be out of reach, right? Because you would have to pay for travel and all of that kind of stuff to really go to the locations and really check out who is there and who your buyer is and maybe a supplier and things like that. But now, because of everything that's happened in the last 6 months, trade missions have gone digital and they're now virtual. And so it gives bigger access to more people to be able to check out those different markets and really get the information that they need. So I want to talk about, we've got about 10 minutes left. We've got a couple of things to cover. I want to talk about success stories. So do you have some success stories you can share with us of how, EDC has helped a woman-owned business, whether that's financial tools or connections or certifications? Do you have some examples that you can share with us, maybe, Jennifer? Because I know Laura and Shamira have already kind of talked about how you guys have really helped them in different ways, but I'm sure you talk to entrepreneurs all the time and you have some amazing examples.
Oh, there's so many, and they're so inspiring. I mean, one of the things that maybe I can raise right now is that I'm super proud of is a few things that we've done more of recently at EDC. For example, with our strategy to support more women-owned and women-led businesses, EDC, of course, recognizes the challenges that women entrepreneurs, women founders face in raising capital. And I'm sure Laura's, experienced this direct hand, even with her most recent capital raise. But EDC launched in 2019 a $50 million Women in Trade investment program. And earlier in 2020, we doubled that to a $100 million fund. And this is really to provide direct equity capital into companies that are growing and scaling, women-founded companies growing and scaling. And with this program, what we did is it enabled EDC to invest both directly into women-founded companies at an earlier stage than we typically would. Within our mandate, there's always some restrictions, but in this case, we were able to create some funding that would go to women-owned businesses at an earlier stage when it's more difficult for them to access that capital to grow. And there's been some incredible companies. And through the COVID period, when COVID hit, our investment team expanded that offering to essentially do a due diligence light. We call it our BCAP investment matching program. So for any companies that were looking to raise and of course found themselves in a really difficult position once COVID hit, we wanted to really support those companies. So if there was an institutional or venture capital investor looking to or willing to invest during this time, EDC would match those investments to enable the founder to access the capital that they need to grow during this period. And I'm so excited to say that 14% of all the investments we've made since March have been to women-led companies. So awesome. Tons of success stories. Women are not stopping, letting this pandemic stop them. They're just going for it. And there's businesses in the life sciences area that are taking advantage of the current situation. What I've been really amazed at is how women entrepreneurs have pivoted during this time, whether it's, going quick to get online presence to be able to sell their products and services through e-commerce, or doing a 180 altogether. One business I know about in a Quebec-based business who is in the line of pet products, disinfectants and odor removal products, was able to shift all her entire equipment and get quick approval from the government to make hand sanitizer. Remember that period where you couldn't get a bottle of hand sanitizer from anywhere? Incredible stories of pivoting. Another woman that offered meal services for children in school. And of course, kids weren't going to school in April, May, and June, but she turned around and created a a kit that kids could make meals that she sold in grocery stores, and it took off because parents were looking for things for their kids to do while they were at home. So the incredible stories of pivots and resilience of women entrepreneurs has been really impressive.
I love that. I just got chills. Anyway, so we've got about 6 minutes left, but I want to dig into a little bit of diversity before we go. So I'm going to ask each one of you, the industry is changing. People are starting to understand the value in diversity, although we still have a way to go in a lot of respects. How do we invest in diversity now in a real and meaningful way? And then how do we go beyond that to ensure a truly rich and diverse industry for the future? So Laura, I'm going to start with you. I'm going to ask each of you just to give us one thing.
One thing that we can do to expand on diversity.
One thing, yeah, that we can expand on it in a meaningful way. And how do we invest in it right now?
One thing.
I'm putting you
trying to think of one thing instead of like, because I'm like,
There's
okay,
probably a lot. I mean, even if you want to list it, we probably got about a minute each person.
Okay. So the first thing that comes to mind is maybe a bit of a long-term game, but that would be that as parents trying to encourage our kids to go into different industries and to really see, okay, I'm going to try to intentionally treat my son same way that I treat my daughter, and breed these like habits like Shamira mentioned of taking risks, especially among young girls. I think this is something that should be so encouraged, and to like learn new things and be scared and be vulnerable. In the case of our like young boys, encouraging them to open up more and maybe share more about their feelings, because I know that this is a huge issue in a lot of men. So that'd be one thing. It's just like within our own households, encouraging diversity, making sure that our kids are spending time with people from lots of different diverse backgrounds, watching movies that have different diverse backgrounds. That's a bit of a long term, but in the short term, as leaders and as business owners, making sure that our hiring practices align with this as well. So hiring people from a diverse set of experiences. So whether that's like the socioeconomic environment that they grew up in, or their ethnicity, or their sexual orientation, or their gender, just making sure that we have a fully rounded out team base. And I think that there's lack of diversity is usually not something that someone is ever doing intentionally. I think that those cases are actually very rare. And usually it's something that's a little bit more unintended bias, where managers tend to like hiring people that they'll get along with and that they can see themselves getting a beer with after work, for example. And that tends to be people that are very similar to themselves. So I think it's also about recognizing these implicit biases that we have and intentionally steering ourselves away from them.
Awesome. Thank you. Shamira, one thing.
One thing. So I can tell you it's happened very naturally in this company. And the reason is that we work with the program. It's a government program. There's a weird thing in Canada where even though we're more open-minded, if you're an East Indian person in the US and you look for a job, you can get a job easily. Whereas in Canada, employers ask for Canadian experience, which is crazy. But anyways, they do. So there's lots of government programs where we hire co-op people. So every year we make it a point to hire at least 6 or 7 co-op people. And depending on the time of the year and what year it is, there's different ethnicities that are more like, we've just hired a lot of Brazilian people recently, but other times it's people from Asia or people from India. So we bring these co-op people in. They are super hardworking people that are desperately looking for an opportunity. And then what we do is we have 3 months, roughly 3 months where you're not paying anything, but that's tremendous time for you to really know if that person's the right person. So if you walk around our offices, I think we speak something like 40 languages in here. Like it's amazing how multicultural we are, but that program has been really instrumental in making us that way, right? Because even though we don't hire a lot of the co-op people, but we probably hire maybe 30% of the people that come in as a co-op student. But it's just amazing. It's had over the years, right?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. And I think working from home helps us also to look remotely. Jennifer, last word, last thing. How do we push diversity forward?
Well, you know what? And I love what both Laura and Shamira have talked about today. But what I'm going to say is I think we should all challenge ourselves to change stereotypes, right? Stereotypes exist everywhere. And particularly when we think about entrepreneurs. And I think the person who said it first is Dr. Wendy Sukier of the Women's Entrepreneurship Knowledge Hub. and studies have been done with kids that when you ask them to draw a picture of what it looks like to be an entrepreneur, often we think of Steve Jobs or Mark Zuckerberg, but we have so many amazing women entrepreneurs and women leaders out there today. And I think we need to speak up and we need to share those stories more to be able to change the stereotypes of what it means to be an entrepreneur, what it means to innovate, and what it means to be successful. And a lot of it starts with us as women, right? Seeing the possibility in ourselves and going for it. And I think, Laura and Shamira, thank you for being with us today, because you've shown a great example of what it means to go for it and go big.
I love that. So thank you so much to Laura, Shamira, Jennifer for joining me today. It's a big topic and we only had time to scratch the surface, really. But every little bit helps and I really enjoyed it. I think there's a lot to take from our chat today in honor of Women's Entrepreneurship Day. To find out more about Export Development Canada and how they can help your business, head over to their website at edc.ca/women-in-trade. And if this is a subject that's close to your heart, don't forget to check out my Woman in Supply Chain series on the podcast, as well as Blended. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We really appreciate it. And go and celebrate the women entrepreneurs in your life. Thank you, guys, for joining me.